Most courses do a really good job of explaining things. They walk you through the concepts, show you examples, maybe even give you a workbook. And then they say, okay, now go do it. And you're left sitting there thinking, wait, how do I actually do this? That's because most courses are designed to transfer information. But information isn't the same as skill. And if your students can't actually do the things you're teaching them, your course hasn't done its job. Welcome to Course Creation for Solopreneurs. I'm Dr. Curtis Satterfield, and I've spent 17 years as an educator and course designer helping thousands of students learn new skills. Now, I help solopreneurs like you create courses that actually transform your students and grow your business. Let's get into it. So how do you fix this? I call it the Handoff Method. Think about how surgeons are trained. Nobody watches a YouTube video on heart surgery and then walks into an operating room to try it out. That would be insane. Instead, there's a progression. First, the resident watches the surgeon perform the procedure. Then they assist while the surgeon guides them. Now you do it while I watch. And only after many repetitions like this does the resident surgeon perform the surgery on their own. Now imagine if medical schools skipped those middle steps. Just showed some videos and handed students a scalpel. Good luck, you watch the tutorial. It would be like the Dark Ages. No one would go to the doctor because you're more likely to die than get better. But that's exactly what most online courses do. They explain and then expect their students to apply it on their own. There's a better way, and I've seen it work over and over again during my 17 years as a college professor. And one of the most powerful moments was when I was teaching a small group course for makers that I offered a few years ago. We were working on niching down because most of my students were trying to be big box stores that sell everything under the sun. And I kept telling them they need to be more like a boutique that specializes in specific products. So we went through a lesson on niching down. I gave examples, I showed them my process for figuring out their niche. Then we went over some examples together where I gave them business ideas and they came up with the niche. Then for the next week, they had a workbook to do the same exercises, but for their own business. Now, all through the meeting, one of my clients, Joseph, was struggling. He just couldn't think of a niche for himself. He understood the process, and he was able to pick out the right niches from the examples, but he couldn't think of one for himself. And I told him, it's okay. That's what the workbook and the exercises are for. You'll do them on your own this week. The next week, when we got on the call, he was the first to raise his hand. I found my niche, were the first words out of his mouth. He was so excited that he'd finally had a breakthrough for his business. Later that month at his first craft fair, Joseph tested his niche and made $400. A huge improvement compared to the fact he wasn't selling anything he had made previous to taking my course. That's the Handoff Method in action, and it has 3 simple steps. Me, us, you. Me is where you demonstrate. You show them how it's done. You explain your process. Us is where you practice together. You give them examples and guide them through it while you're still there to help. You is where they take over. They do the same exercises on their own until the skill is theirs. There's an old saying often attributed to Confucius. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. That's the whole idea. Your students don't truly understand something until they've done it themselves. But they can't just jump to doing it. They need to see it first, then practice with support, then own it. Now let me show you how to actually implement this. Think about what we already discussed in this episode. I explained the concept. I gave you the surgeon example. I told you about Joseph. That was the me phase. You watch me demonstrate what the Handoff Method is and how it works. If you were in one of my coaching calls or my live course, here's what we'd do next. I'd say, okay, pick one skill from your course, something your clients need to be able to do by the end. And then we'd work through it together. Now, if your course is pre-recorded and you're wondering how this works without live interaction, hang tight. I'll get to that in a minute. Let's say you're teaching people how to write a welcome email sequence. I'd ask you, what does the me phase look like for that? What would you demonstrate? And you might say, I'd show them one of my welcome emails and walk them through why I wrote each part the way I did. And then I'd follow up with, now what about the us phase? How would you practice this together? And you might say, I could give them a sample business and we'd write a welcome email together on the call with me guiding them. We keep going until you had all 3 phases mapped out. That's the us phase for my course. We're working through it together. I'm guiding you through thinking while you're applying it to your own stuff. Then for the you phase, I give you an exercise. I'd have you go through every lesson in your course and break it down. What's the me? What's the us? What's the you? You do it on your own without me there until you got the whole course mapped out. See what just happened? I demonstrated the method. Then I walked you through how we'd practice it together, and then I told you what you do on your own. Me, us, you. Now that example works great if you're running a live course or doing coaching calls. But what if your course is pre-recorded? How do you use the us phase if you're not actually there with them? When I was in grade school many years ago, I remember that the math textbooks had a unique feature. If you flip to the back of the book, you would find solutions to the exercises. And I thought, brilliant, now I don't have to do the work, I can just copy the answers. Alas, it was not to be, because the teachers had seen through the brilliant plans of 10-year-old me. You see, not all the exercises had answers. Typically, it was only the odd number problems. A teacher would go over the concepts in class, demonstrate how to do the math, and walk through several examples. Then we'd be assigned problems from the book where we had the solutions so we could check our work. Then we'd be assigned problems that didn't have the answers for homework, much to my dismay. That is the handoff method in action. The me part is the teacher explaining in class. Us is working the problems with solutions to get practice, and you is doing the exercises without solutions. This is the structure you'll need to use if you've got a course where students don't get to interact with you. Give them exercises where they can check their work. Provide example answers they can compare against. That's your us phase for a pre-recorded course. If you're building a course right now, look at your lessons and ask yourself, am I just explaining or am I actually handing off the skill? If you've got questions about course creation that you'd like me to answer in a future episode, use the send me a message link in the description and let me know what you're struggling with. Thanks for listening. If this episode helped you, take a second to subscribe and leave a review. It's the best way to support the show. Also, be sure to check the show notes for any links and resources mentioned in this episode. Now go create a course that transforms.